Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff, and today we're continuing with me catching up with all the records from the year that are probably great but I didn't get a chance to listen to or digest. And today is certainly no exception because I'm going to be talking about the Danger Mouse and Black Thought record Cheat Codes that has pretty much taken, I don't know, the music world by storm, I guess. Um, so yeah, for those who are unaware, which is probably like literally zero people, Danger Mouse is a pretty legendary producer, and Black Thought is of the Roots fame, who are a legendary hip hop group in their own right. Very, I don't know, very influential, very ahead of their time as well. If you go back and listen to those early The Roots records, it's definitely like, I don't know, just in terms of the way that Black Thought was rapping on those records, it's kind of like incredible when you compare it to a lot of his contemporaries at the time, in my opinion. Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for the Roots early work. And essentially, this is just like, I don't know, sort of a dream collaboration for a lot of people. Essentially, overall, this is like a very tight hip hop project that is just putting on display the absolute mastery of that both the members have. In terms of execution on basically every front, it's just top notch. Black Thought's verses are just incredibly dense flexes in lyrical prowess and effortless flows, and Danger's beats are all buttery smooth while flowing into each other really well, creating a very cohesive kind of like atmosphere and project front to back. This record's only like 40 minutes as well, so it's a pretty tight track listing. And I will say that the instrumentals here are largely pulling from an old school boom bap style that definitely suits a record that feels this forged from experience. But you're getting a ton of smooth jazzy bass lines, very organic drums, and samples pulled a lot from soul. But at the same time, even though it has such a kind of old school sound, there's definitely like a modern cleanliness to it that really, that really kind of like brings it to the modern age, I guess, like almost updates the sound to some extent. But don't make any mistake, there's nothing here that's like ultra innovative or anything like that. It's just incredibly well executed, kind of like masterful beats and verses basically front to back. So I can really appreciate the record from that angle, and the way that everything like flows into each other is also pretty great. But I will say that I guess like so I'm only going off like a couple listens really. I'm not quite as enamored with this as everybody else is. I definitely understand the appeal. But for me, I also think that its biggest strength, which is just how masterfully it does everything, is almost like a bit of a double-edged sword, a little bit. Just because like there is a good amount of variety here. Like there's some instrumentals that are more lush, more cinematic. There are some that are more introspective. There's some that are kind of like hazy. There's some that are just straight like grimy banger type beats. But everything very much pulls from the same playbook, so it does feel a little bit too consistent almost. And I would have preferred maybe like a touch more variety, I guess. And also, like, after two listens, it's very difficult with how dense Black Thought's verses are. It's very difficult to pick all of that apart. So, I'm sure with repeated listens, there's going to be a ton to find in all those verses. So this is definitely one that could grow on me. But as I said, I still think it's great to start with. I mean, like, just going through the track listing, starting off with Sometimes, you get this smooth as hell start to the record with this very, like, jazzy backing beat complemented by a dominant soul sample. The opening verse fits perfectly, and it's just like a very great cinematic start. The next song, Cheat Codes, is one of the grimier tunes on the record. What it lacks in flash, ultimately, it just makes up for in bars. Black Throat, Black Throat, what the hell? Black Thought comes in with just a solid dose of energy and dense rhymes that don't stop until the beat fades out. That's one thing I really do like about this record for sure. It's like such an unabashedly hip hop record as well. Like there really isn't anything here that is like super out the norm. There's no like crazy over the top hooks or anything like that. It's just bars front to back over like very, very good sounding, incredibly well produced beats, and you just kind of have to respect it for that. But yeah, on Chico's, I love the plucked string melody and the low-key beat, but I definitely think that Black Thought steals the show. The next track, Darkest Part, has a really prominent piano sample at its core. It's quite bright and melodic, despite how bleak the picture painted in the lyrics are about the sorry state of the music industry essentially, and how, like, with it being an industry, it kind of like tears the soul out of a kind of artist who tries to go in with art being kind of like at the forefront of what they do. So yeah, kind of not super unexpected, I guess, but also, very bittersweet getting such a great piece of art out of that message ultimately. but it also has the first of what I would say are like a lot of features on this record that end up doing quite a lot to break up Black Thought's verses. I also respect the fact that a lot of the hooks across this record are just kind of like really low key, nothing like super over the top, nothing like ultra flashy. Like the hook on this is just a sung soul sample. So yeah, another just great track in the track listing in my opinion. No Gold Teeth just opens with this incredible bass line that I kind of adore. It's probably one of my favourites on the entire record, to be honest. In combination with this guitar lick and a really jazzy beat, gives it a very, very classic, almost timeless feel with this like modern polish that the whole record has. And despite it being the longest track so far, it doesn't really feel it because it's another track where it's just like Black Thought spitting bars the entire time, and they're all about him coming up in the rap game and his determination to continue excelling and how much he has excelled like over the course of his career, which I would say at this point is very, very earned. But yeah, it's just packed with great imagery and serves as another great like no filler, all killer kind of like track. The next song, because instrumentally, is a pretty laid-back and more mid-paced, lush-sounding boom-bap tune. It has a variety of decent features. I like Joey's verse as well, because in contrast to Black Thought, Joey definitely has more of a chilled vibe in contrast. But, you know, regardless, Black Thought and Joey are both kind of like painting these kind of like bleak images of growing up on the streets. It's nothing like super out of the ordinary, but it's definitely incredibly well executed. Both their verses are great. So yeah, another just strong track in the track listing. Belies is kind of an odd one actually. This has a Doom feature. I think it's a Doom feature from quite a while back as well, considering it's Danger Mouse that brought this one to the record essentially. And it's not surprising that Black Thought comes through and up with one of his like fieriest verses. I feel like he may have been, you know, extra hyped up to get this track as good as possible to pay respects to one of the greatest. And the instrumental is actually like pretty hazy and atmospheric, featuring this like warm bass loop, a lot of ride cymbal, and a few melodic flourishes that just really help the vibe. Doom's verse is just another like great Doom verse featuring his iconic flow and delivery. So yeah, it's just another really solid track and definitely a great kind of like final piece to get from Doom, I suppose. Or I have to imagine this is one of the last pieces we'll hear from him anyway. But yeah, regardless, it's just another great track. The next song, Aquamarine, is another standout. So something about the instrumental on this one really reminds me of like Gorillaz. It feels quite cinematic, almost melancholic, despite the like pacey constant hi-hats. And I love the like spacey melody that pops into the mix in the first third of the track. There's something about it that's just like very cartoonish but somehow it still like very much works in context of the whole record. I think it's just like the way it's produced, the kind of like hazy filter it has, the sort of like lo-fi sound it has overall as well. Like all of those elements allow it to like fit in with the record really, really well. I really like Michael. Oh god, I'm gonna pronounce this definitely wrong. Kiwanuka's. There we go. I really love Michael Kiwanuka's low-key hook as well, where he just kind of like sings the hook. It's very like very, very mellowed, very, very like low-key and pretty low in the mix too. But I think it does a great job of breaking up the verses while fitting into the tone of the song and the album. And the second verse on here is particularly unrelenting and once again dense with imagery and rhymes. The next track, Identical Death, stands out as well. So this is probably, despite being a very short song, it's actually one of the most introspective on the record. It's just one verse from Black Thought. It's very introspective, and the instrumental is ultra sparse to fit the kind of vibe of the track. I love the fact that the back half is just like pure production flash from Danger Mouse too. What is probably the other banger on the record, the next track, Strangers, comes in with what is easily the most urgent beat on the record. It's kind of, urgent instrumental on the record. It's kind of funny because the beat isn't really all that punchy, but it features a ton of like odd sounds that all add up in small ways to something that has a lot of energy. And of course, to match it, this track has a set of stellar features from Run the Jewels and ASAP Rocky. It's pretty rare that you hear just like 4 verses from 4 different MCs that all bring their A game and not really have a standout, but just enjoying all of them because they're all, I don't know, like top of the game type shit. So yeah, huge shout out to this track. It's probably like the banger of the record, maybe other than Cheat Codes, I suppose, but with all the features, this one makes more sense in that spot. But again, it fits in with the record perfectly. Like, one thing I haven't really talked about is how all these tracks have like a similar kind of production quality to them that make them incredibly cohesive, but also the way the instrumentals kind of like so at the end and the start of each track there's like nice little variations in the instrumentals that help them flow into each song really well, and this definitely does that into Close to Famous, which comes in with another very classic sounding boom beat instrumental, and Black Thought spitting front to back. Being towards the back of the record, it does start to blend into the mix just a little bit, I'll say, by the way. But it's definitely not a bad track, and flows beautifully into the next track as well, which is Saltwater, and opens with these syncopated drum fills and lush strings before this absolutely nasty beat switch into a grimy lo-fi boom bap beat. The song features Conway the Machine, which, you know, is such a perfect glove fit on an instrumental like this. And it's just, you know, another incredible feature this record can really just show as part of its repertoire, essentially. And then the final song, Violas and Lupitas, I think that's how you pronounce that, finally wraps up with a slightly more smooth and laid back vibe. The instrumental definitely feels quite conclusive, with its like very lush strings being a prominent feature on the chorus, and Black Thought's verse essentially just reinstates his own abilities, and it feels very appropriate after hearing an entire record of him just absolutely displaying mastery over, you know, the art form, essentially. So yeah, I can definitely see the appeal of this record, because individually I can't really pick up any tracks that I thought were particularly bad, really. This really is just like an all killer, no filler record. But like I said, I think the one thing that is unfortunate is you almost get numb to how good it is to some extent. And I do feel like it could have done with maybe just like a touch more variety. Like, I don't know, maybe if the production style needed changes the touch here and there, but it's like, it's so consistent that it's easy to get sucked into the atmosphere of the record and not really get as much out of certain tracks as a result of that, because so many, well, I mean, all of the tracks here have incredibly dense verses and whatnot. So, yeah, I would say that's really the only weakness, but like, you know, it's really not much of a weakness. I'm essentially just saying the record's doing what it does too good. So it's sometimes just, I don't know, it almost like wallows in its own brilliance to some extent, which is kind of like one of the weirdest compliments I think I've ever given, honestly. But no, it's an incredible record. Just, I can completely understand the hype. Like I said, I'm slightly less enamored with it just because I think I don't know, the experience of listening to it for me is like, I'm really enjoying it for the first like half, and then after that point it's got such a consistent vibe that it just kind of, I don't want to say it becomes white noise, because there's definitely still like a couple elements that help tracks stand out, and especially in the back half is where you get a lot of the more unique tracks actually. But even still, it's just the production quality is maybe just a tiny bit too similar across the record, and it does end up feeling just a little bit white noisy to me, and kind of like ends up bleeding together just a touch more than I would like. But yeah, I mean, it's just an incredible record that honestly will probably grow on me with time. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say. Banger project. Definitely check this one out if you haven't. It's kind of unfortunate is probably the wrong word, but it's pretty dumb of me to wait this long to listen to this one, to be honest. But yeah, just listening. I hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you around.